Welcome to Truth Telling with Elizabeth DiAlto, the podcast dedicated to focusing on the truth that's always evolving within us and around us, where we explore the potentiality of truth as a highly esteemed value, especially in the context of everything that falls under the topics of healing, growth, leadership, and creativity. If you're new to me, full expression is my jam. I'm the creator of a practice called Wild Soul Movement. My flagship year-long online women's circle is called Power. I run virtual new moon circles every month, weekend workshops all over the planet throughout the year, and I work with clients one-on-one. I also started doing stand-up comedy for fun in 2018. So this is a place where you can come with your multiple talents and passions to be encouraged, nourished, and cultivated. There's a lot of noise and ignorance in our current culture, and this show also aims to cut through that by exploring the truths of a diverse range of incredible voices. From authors, artists, creatives, and educators to activists, speakers, and those in various scientific and esoteric fields, our guests hail from cultures and countries all over the world. The main intention here is to contribute to creating a kinder, gentler, more curious, collaborative, reverent world where people respect each other's backgrounds, experiences, and truths, and they trust in themselves and in life and recognize that we need each other. We post a new interview every Monday, and if you want to keep up with the show notes and quotes from our guests, you can follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth DiAlto. A few disclaimers. No episode of the show is meant for everyone, and every episode is meant for whoever needs it on the right day at the right time. Not all guest views will reflect my own, and that's intentional. We don't learn, grow, heal, or improve by staying in our comfortable bubbles with all of our people who look, think, or live exactly how we do. If you love what you hear and find it useful and inspiring, the best way to show your appreciation is to share the episode, subscribe to the show, and leave us a rating or review wherever you listen in from. Thank you so much for being here, and here we go. This is episode number 305 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth DiAlto, and today's guest, Zuyapa Jackson, is one of my dearest friends. This was the kind of conversation that originally inspired me to start this podcast almost 4 years ago, just chatting with a friend about things we care about deeply, like healing, spirituality, and truth, and then thinking, damn, I bet other people would love to be fly on the walls for this conversation. So I hope you feel that way as you listen. Zuyapa's big truth was around deeply trusting herself. We also talked about how fine is never good enough and made some really great distinctions between surviving, living, and thriving. We talked about how we're always cycling through the three and how we aren't meant to be static or dominant in any of them. We got into what it's like to be a knower, how we have to go deep into the dark places in order to heal, one main reason being to resolve our shame. Zuyapa shared why she thinks we're constipated as a society and how we're not digesting everything that goes on in our lives, how important it is to have places to turn to be truthful, and why we have to purify our physical and energetic bodies to come back to ourselves. She also left us with a beautiful invitation to pray and shared how to use it as a way to commune with not only the divine, but yourself as well. This was a really beautiful conversation. I could barely stop smiling throughout all of it. I hope you love it too. Listen many times over, share it with anyone you think will appreciate it. The show notes will be at untameyourself.com/305. Again, that's untameyourself.com/305. And as well, some of you who've been listening regularly know and may have checked out about a month or so ago, if you listen in real time, I updated the one-on-one offerings on my website, specifically my one-on-one immersions. And what has happened since then is I have been meeting people locally here in Los Angeles who want to work with me one-on-one and getting messages from people who want to work in a more ongoing capacity beyond the immersion process. So if you head on over to wildsoulmovement.com and you click on work with me, you will see 2 additional one-on-one offerings that I've added there. One is a package called Alive. And then after that, for people who do Alive with me, there is an Embody package where we continue to provide ongoing support and integration And of course, these things are very customized, very personalized to what you have going on, and as well relates and connects you back to the things in the areas in your life, whether it's in the category of health, wealth, relationships, or spirituality and self-mastery, or a specific movement or something going on in a business, or a very important relationship in your life, or a big transition. All of these things that fall under the categories, just like this podcast, of healing, growth, leadership, and creativity. That's what we dig in, and that's what we work on with and through in my one-on-one work. So if you want to check that out, go to wildsoulmovement.com/private, as in private one-on-one work. Again, that's wildsoulmovement.com/private to check out those offerings. And now let's get into today's show. Y'all, you know I get extra excited when it's my close personal friends who are coming on the show. And this is my dear friend, Zuyapa Jackson. We're probably going to talk about healing and nuance and all kinds of things that I love to geek out on today. How are you?
I'm good.
How are you feeling in your body? I like to start the interview with that question these days.
That is a fantastic question to start with. Fantastic question.
Thanks.
Because right now I'm feeling in my body completely different than I was yesterday. And I've been paying attention to it and like sitting with it. And it never ceases to amaze me how we change how we are in our body and don't realize it, even though we know it. Like, okay, I'll explain what I mean. So I'm pretty aware in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like over the last week, I think I was saying to you, I got really exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
I was really tired. Like I would be walking down the street and just like close my eyes. And I'd be like, okay, you're walking right now. You can't go to sleep.
In New York City.
In New York City. Exactly. But what I realized is that like there was a different level of exhaustion, that it was like my soul was tired.
Okay.
And so my body was moving, but my soul was tired.
Okay. This is really fascinating, of course, that you're bringing this up, because I just a couple weeks ago started seeing a Chinese medicine person.
Yeah.
And you might know this, but I'm not remembering the three different, they call them the three treasures. There's like the qi, I think the shen is one of them, and then there's something else. And one of them is like the physical body, and then there's the energy, and then there's the spirit. Mm-hmm. And when she was testing me for everything, my energy and my spirit are like soaring, but my physical body was exhausted. And I'm like, that makes so much sense. Like, I can't even describe to you how much I have slept and rested in the last 2.5 years. Like going through all kinds of trauma healing and stuff and whatever. And yet some days I feel like I'm bursting with energy a lot of the time. But it's because there's two other forces. It's not just like one.
Exactly. Yeah. There's always the three.
Yeah.
And even as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, well, hey, maybe it was my body that was tired and my spirit couldn't anchor in. So then my body was feeling the exhaustion and my like energy, my soul couldn't come in. So then I was disconnected and not fully in my body. Right? Yeah. So that's the thing too. It's like discernment, and it's getting to know our nuance. It's getting to know our personal nuance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, like I messaged you earlier this morning, I received a healing because I knew I was just tired. I was like, listen, called up someone. Can you do this for me? She did it 5:00 in the morning. And when I woke up after, I felt the sheets on my body. I felt such a softness. My mind was calm and I was like, okay, she's done. And then my body just wanted to rest. But I feel like I'm here and I feel like I can be soft again because I feel integrated.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, reflecting on the last 2.5 years, there's a part of me that goes, how did I even do all the things that I do? But it's really, all of my work is about integrating and being in the body. and coming back to the body.
Yes.
So I think that's really how.
Yes. Okay, let's go on to something else.
Well,
so it's not too far. It's not too far.
Okay, because I still have to ask you the actual first question we start with, but keep going.
Okay.
This is what I love about you. Okay. Continue.
So
I feel like a judge. I'll allow it.
Thank you. So I had someone come in for session last week, and I know her personally. I've seen her. She wasn't looking great. I wasn't going to push, right? Like I'm not pushy. But then finally she came in for something like a cord cutting or something from a relationship. And I was like, you don't look well. And so she agreed to let me do something else to like heal what's going on in her aura. And afterwards she looked so much better and she felt better. And I was like, listen, fine is never good enough.
Right.
We say we feel fine, it's not good enough. And to her, I'm like, especially when you have me. Like I'm here. I'm down the street, literally. And the reason why I kind of go into that is because of what you're saying is this is how we live. Mm-hmm. We live just fine. We don't realize that like we're actually not doing okay because the body is so resilient. The spirit is so resilient. It will adapt. It will adjust. It will do whatever it has to do to keep living, keep surviving. But is it optimal?
Yeah.
And this is actually something else that's part of my going into the question you're going to ask. Last year, I had a complete reset. I think this is last year. I don't know. I'm not great with time reference, but I completely cleansed my body. And I started to realize exactly what was triggering my like inflammation in my stomach, exactly like my sleep cycle, my day cycle, my mood, like every single, not everything, because I know there's always something else to discover, but so many really valuable, important things that help me to even function even more optimally now. Mm-hmm. And then I think back to 10 years ago when I started this whole process and I was like literally, I'm 30, I'm 41, more than 10 years. When I was like eating whatever I wanted to, just doing everything I wanted to do to abuse my body. And I thought I was fine.
Yeah.
And it's like, but over the last, these years, I've been continuously learning about my digestion, continuously learning about just like gut, brain, all this stuff. And the point that I'm making is so many of us are surviving.
Yeah.
Because the body will figure it out. Mm-hmm. It will figure it out. But really, are you really, really, really living and thriving? Mm-hmm. And to me, that's what thriving is, right? It's not like, are you getting all your goals met? Are you doing all this stuff? Are you internally thriving where like you're fertile and everything inside of you is growing and sprouting and, like receiving the light? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So as you're saying that, often you hear conversations talk about like surviving and thriving, but the way you said that, I wrote down like surviving, living, thriving. I feel like living is that transitional as we're on our way, right? Because to switch from survival to thriving is like that's not the leap.
Right.
What's happening in between? There has to be something. It's living.
Yes, it's living. And it takes time. Mm-hmm. And we want it to happen overnight, but like it takes time.
Period. And I would imagine most folks, this is straight hypotheses. Don't anyone take this as like Bible. I would imagine what actually is optimal is probably some kind of toggle between like the high end of the spectrum of living and thriving. Because I don't personally know that I believe, which this might be my thing, that anyone could be thriving 24/7 just because life and everything is so dynamic. Like there's so many challenges. There's so like we could do and in the modern world, who has the actual time and resources? Immediately what just popped into my head was like J-Lo. Like getting like stem cell injections or something obscure, right? And like ridiculously expensive to be thriving.
Yeah.
I think we probably touch it sometimes or have like bursts of it, But my guess would be what's actually optimal for a lot of folks, optimal also factoring in accessible.
Yeah.
Would be like the high end of the spectrum of living.
Yeah.
If that's
Yeah.
like the kind of like the bell curve, maybe, right? Like survival on one end, thrival on one end, and then like the majority hopefully would happen in living. But I bet for so many people it's happening in survival.
Yes, it's happening in survival for lots of people. And the thing about living is we have to be living in the meantime.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's where like the spiritual bypassing comes in, or like wanting to skip everything and go straight from starting your business today and then being wealthy tomorrow.
By the way, I just realized for those watching, I'm using your mug. I didn't do that on purpose.
Oh,
For everyone listening, it was about a month ago, right? That you were staying with me.
Yeah.
Zuyapa stayed with me for like a week. It was so fun. And I have this mug. It says #love. And then on the inside and the bottom is like the emoji with the heart eyes. She used this mug like every day. And I didn't even realize this morning, this is the one I picked up for my lemon water. So
my call to come back.
All right, 10 minutes in, let's ask the first question.
Okay.
This is how we don't really do time and structure and like linear well, especially together. All right, so what's a truth that's having a big impact on your life right now?
Yeah, a big one for me right now. There's a couple, but excuse me. I think personally, the big one is deeply trusting myself, which I know is, a big thing in your world. But it's really been an interesting time for me because I'm a knower. And I have been since I was a kid. And I really didn't understand how I knew the things that I knew. And it's a combination. I think right now it's a combination of that deep trust, but also realizing how important it was to completely clean my body, or as much as I could, to clean my body during that period.
Yeah.
Because when I did that, it was like all the gifts and things that I had as a child came back. And I mean, it was mind blowing. And I realized again how much I was continuing to numb myself, even when I didn't think that I was actually numb.
Yes. So while you were here, I was still in my month of practicing Akashic Records readings.
Yeah.
And I gave you one. And then like a week or two after you left, I got really sick. And I don't usually get sick. There was a flu going around, but I just knew it was this big purge that was asking me to clean out my body, like what you're describing. And I went back to some medical medium stuff I'd looked at before. And with everything, there's like nothing that I like prescribe to 1,000%, or subscribe to 1,000%. But just getting back in the groove of like way more fruit in my diet, and the celery juice thing, which just deeply, deeply like cleansing out, moving things through my digestion, and just a couple of those little tweaks, and exactly like you're describing, it's just like, and I think this is also kind of like their surviving, living, thriving thing. It's like a black and white TV to color to like these high def TVs that we have now where it looks like the picture's popping out of the screen.
Yeah. And we also have to be okay going back and forth between all of them.
Yeah.
Like and this is, I guess, what you were saying earlier, we really will not in general be in one state all the time. Like the world is not designed that way. Nothing is designed that way. Unless you're literally not moving forward, you're staying literally in one spot, but then you're still going to start fluctuating because you're in the same spot and you're going to be like, running around this little wheel.
You did the guest mentor call for my power program last month in February. And I'm trying to remember, did I give my plant metaphor on your call? where it's like I'm constantly looking at my plants and noticing how like part of it's dying, part of it is grown, and part of it is blossoming or like having new little tender shoots coming out.
Yep.
This is
Yep.
us.
Yes, it's us. I have one here too, and I literally watch them grow, and I look at them how oftentimes they come up overnight,
Yes.
but then once they come up, they start to unfold during the day.
Uh-huh.
And I look at them and I'm like, I just remind myself, this is how much we can grow every single moment.
Totally. Remember as you were leaving, the one plant that had been next to the couch had like those two, like,
Yeah.
because you saw how excited I got. I'm like, oh, little tender shoots. They're like full shoots now. It's only been like a
Love
month.
it.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And so long underneath,
Uh-huh.
which is like that cliche, we all say, oh, you plant the seeds and then it grows. But really, it's actually kind of true.
Well,
It's so true.
And the concept, well, especially certain plants, right? I know this is true for bamboo. Some have to grow down before they can even grow up and out.
Yes. Which is basically synonymous with the dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
When we have to go deep. When you have to go into that dark place. And I kind of want to get into something that we touched on when I was there. It also came up in the reading. And I mentioned to you that I see it a lot with people. And I kind of want to dive into this because it's a big deal. And that's shame.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the reason why it's so meaningful, and I can even talk about what my shame was about, at some point during this next few minutes.
Sure.
But it was more than one thing. And I think the thing is, this is part of why we're so constipated as a society. This is why humans are constipated in their personal development. Not only because you're constipated, but also which most
you need more fiber, bitch.
And water and like release and breathing. So many things. But it's because we're not necessarily in this day or any day, I don't know, in a space where it's okay to express what's actually going on.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't know where to turn to be truthful, when you don't know where to turn to say, I'm still trying to figure this out. I know it's been years, but I'm still trying because something's not working. Then you keep it inside and it becomes shame and it becomes a mask and then it doesn't go anywhere. And there's just, so many, even people who really mean well, our friends really mean well, our family really means well, but people have their own lives to live.
Yep.
They have their own stuff they're dealing with. And we are in this commercial society that says we have to produce, we have to have things, we have to have, all this stuff. And so everything is taking us out of ourselves. And so then we don't necessarily have the space to show up for someone who's trying to be in themselves.
Yes.
So it becomes a self-perpetuating thing of where pain gets misdiagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
And suffering gets diagnosed as mental illness,
mm-hmm.
or having to hide gets diagnosed as like a mental problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, really is something that like turns me inside when I see it. Everybody talking about mental health, mental health, mental health. Yes, there's some things that are that are like genetically, biologically, physically, going on in the system.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's something else.
Last year, I came the closest I've ever been to being like, am I depressed?
Mm.
I was having this experience that you know intimately about with this new man. And it really worked me. I'm on the other side of it now and I see the gifts, but it took me out.
Yeah.
And I remember, again, that was another phase where I literally needed so much rest. And like this thing that you're saying about where can you turn to be truthful? I thought about so often how fortunate I was to have many friends like you who were like not only people I could trust and I could be my unraveled self with, but like healer type people who could actually hold space too. And not just, it's not even about like that I needed advice, but who could just like literally be with me in
Yeah.
moments where I couldn't be alone.
Yeah.
And not, I don't, and you know, so many of my friends are so spread out. It's not like you all were like in my home hugging me, but like you're like a voice message away, a text message away, and how like vital that was for my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Being able to be received and seen and not try to fix or what you're feeling diminished or diverted. Because that's the thing too, right? When you're like, something's really wrong, I'm not feeling well, and someone's like, you're going to be okay.
Right.
Does that really help? And, you know, again, I do the work, right? Like I go through everything that I'm asking people to put themselves through.
Yeah.
I receive healings. I do everything. And this is in particular something that I experienced.
Right.
And it's also why I've come to this space of deep trust in myself, because I was going through something for a really long time and people kept saying, it's me, you're fine. And I was like, no, there's something else here. And I couldn't find anyone who could hold that with me until I found someone, but it was years. And a person they barely knew me. They just walked up and were kind of like, oh, I see something going on here. I can fix that in like 2 seconds. And I've not been the same since. And so that's also been me getting back to myself and being like, I knew it. I knew that I am allergic to house dust and I just got my allergy test back, you know, like all the things that I knew, couldn't explain. And even people who loved me and wanted to help didn't get it. So they couldn't. And even realizing like how I really have an issue with time reference and like, but time is money. Time is manifestation. It's the cyclical parts of being on the earth. You know, like I don't have earth in my chart, which I say to everybody who listen. but that's a thing. So traditional things aren't going to work for me. It's like, what really works for me? Who am I really?
You know, I love this thread of conversation. Especially, I just want to hone in for a moment because obviously not every single episode of the show is going to resonate for everyone and not every point is going to like be for every person. But
Sure.
I always feel when there is like a big chunk of the audience out there going, oh, that's me. I get that. I feel that way. And so a lot of people, whether you identify as any kind of like healer or this is your path, you can relate to turning to people who are close to you, who care about you and you know love you, who actually can't be with you, who can't hold you. And I kind of want to just validate and dignify for people how painful that is. When you go to someone and they just like brush it off or say, you'll be fine. And they think they're doing something for you. They're like believing in you, right? Encouraging you. But it's like, I don't need encouragement. I need you to be like, yes, that hurts. Yes, that is.
And it's a fine line, right? It's a fine line because for some people, that saying that is feeding,
enabling,
whatever. It's enabling. So it's a really fine line. And the important thing about this again is to get back to ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we can't put all of the faith in finding something outside.
Yeah. So,
and I start out with the whole cleansing myself thing, because that was another part of me. I mean, okay, to be honest, I do a lot of energetic cleansing. Like my energy field is pretty clear. In receiving lots of things, activations and initiations, like I'm expanded, but my physical body is a different thing. And so in doing that, all of this purification is necessary to get to a place where you are within yourself, and then you can seek other people when it's helpful, without having to rely on other people in the general public, right? So much for your survival, I guess.
This is why I'm such a stickler about unsolicited advice.
Oh, yeah.
Because the mind isn't necessarily built. Like, I know I am personally wired to care much less what other people think than like the average bear.
This is true. This is true.
I've always been, she's like, witness. I've always been that way since I was little. Like, I literally remember being a little kid in the back seat of the car with my parents, and my mom was like talking about something that happened at work. And she's like, yeah, I decided just not to let it bother me. I don't need to care what everyone thinks. And she turns around and looks at me. I might have been like 6. And she was like, I learned that from you. And I always remember that because it was really disorienting for me as a 6-year-old to be like, what do you mean you learned something from me? Like, you're my mom, you know? So I know that I'm more wired that way than the average person, but why that is so important and why I'm so vigilant about don't give me the unsolicited advice is because no one's mind is built to just go to like let it bounce off, to like reject the feedback that comes in. You know what I mean? And we don't have the time or the capacity to process all of the feedback that people constantly want to be giving us.
Yeah.
Depending on the context, you know, like, and a lot of that for me is like in an online platform where it could literally be like hundreds of people dumping their stuff on me. But so much of it is projection. It could be well-meaning, but so much of it also comes from people's own, their needs, their insecurities, their whatever. But what I really want to come back to, what you were saying is why we have to come back to ourselves. One of the things that I think you were alluding to that I just want to articulate is so we know what to ask for when it's time to ask for help, when we do need to go outside of ourselves, or at least have an inkling, you know?
Yeah. And again, in all fairness, I can say that is also a process because even, you know, this is fairly recently the story that I'm telling. And although I kept saying it, I didn't know how to ask for that.
Yeah.
Right? Because again, I'm like, something's wrong with me. So, and I would say it in passing. I'm intentionally not saying what it is, just to not be like instigate something that we can't really get deep into right now.
It's fine.
Yeah, you know, again, like these are processes, you know, especially in the beginning of your process. Yes, you may rely on the right people, hopefully more, whether it's an intuitive, whether it's whatever. And hopefully, you know, these things are ultimately leading you into yourself.
Yeah.
So then you go there when there's something you can't crack, not because for everything you need some help.
Yes. This is how I got into the Akashic Records. This is how I ended up the Chinese medicine person. And I think that is another really valuable thing that you just said. When you bump into something you can't crack, it doesn't matter who you are, how much work you've done, how many accolades, initiations, certifications, activations, trainings, whatever, degrees, we're going to bump into things that we can't crack.
Yeah, because that means there's something to crack.
Yeah.
Like it means there's another level. It means that you're ready to go forward, which is great.
Yeah. And also we're designed to need each other. So
you're not an island.
In this culture that is really built for isolation these days, especially you and I talked about this, and we can get into this a little bit more too. I call it the illusion of connectivity, which is like there's 100 ways to reach a person these days, but how truly connected? How much time are we spending in rooms with people? You and I talked about this a lot while you were here. Days can go by where I have no physical touch.
Yeah.
And there are studies that like, you should have 12 hugs a day. And I'm like, I might have 12 hugs this week if I'm real lucky. You know?
I might have 12 hugs this year.
That's an exaggeration. I'm calling you on that.
No, I need to be touched.
Yeah.
I'm just putting it out there. It's true.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I also think in such an individualistic culture too, where self-reliance, and this goes deeper culturally for certain groups of people as well, is some like big badge of honor or even status symbol, we take ourselves out of even the possibility of getting what we need to live or thrive.
Because we're trying to be hyper independent.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, because it's like it's the flip side of everything is within you.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the ones that kind of triggers me because yes, everything is within you because you are a reflection of the Almighty. You are a reflection of the universe. You have all these things within your system because of the blueprint of human.
Mm-hmm.
However, as individuals, as people walking this earth, there are many things that we do not have access to in those moments
Mm-hmm.
because we haven't cultivated the access to them,
Right.
or we
Right.
haven't done the work, we haven't evolved, and it's more than, the obvious. So you have everything you need is within you to go and find, to go and
Exactly.
discover, so that you're continuously uh, integrating those things. And like, we're saying, coming up against what stopped you from it in the first place.
Yes.
Like
So,
it's the life is, in the grandest sense, the life is the journey.
yeah.
The life is the path.
So one of my forever taglines is everything you've ever needed has always been inside of you. And sometimes people will say to me, why do you say it that way? Why don't you say everything is inside of you? I'm like, because I want to emphasize that it's always been there and it's about access. It's about uncovering. It's not even about discovering. It's about uncovering
Ever. Yeah, I use
what's always
unfold a
been
lot.
there. Yeah, yeah. Love it.
And turning on too.
Mm-hmm.
It's also turning those things on.
Yeah, yeah. These are all the words, right? Uncovering, reclaiming, unshaming, untaming, like all those things.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is un, or re, because you came in with so much.
Potential. But here's so okay, I want to go into this. Our existence is not finite,
Mm-hmm.
and our existence is not just this particular physical go round
Yep.
from this birth to your death.
Right.
And when we say the you, it's like which you, right? Is it this you personality you that was born on your birthday in this physical and is living this life? Or is it this infinite you that was busy on the way down and will be busy when you exit your particular vehicle that you're in?
Yep.
Because I tend to also see like the convenience of switching back and forth between the two as
Mm-hmm.
people are on their path and like exploring spirituality. Because we even karma, it's like, oh, that's karma, that's karma, that's karma. Did you think about what you did last time?
Right.
Like if it's happening to you, it's karma. If it's something else, it's not like.
I love this point because so often we're taking the teachings and the things that we're learning and we're using them to understand other people.
Yeah.
And especially the unfavorable parts. We're not going,
Yes.
how did I do that? When did I
Yeah.
do that? When have I been the abuser? When have
Yeah.
I been the perpetrator?
Yes.
Right? We're so
Yes.
often sharing the stories of when we were the victim or the traumatized person and like that. It's like the hero's journey, right?
Yeah.
But what about when you were the perpetrator in someone else's hero's journey?
Yes. And one, I'll say that much love to all my goddesses. One of them that, is this thing of like, um, I want to be respectful about this because I have a respect for the true path of Wicca.
Hmm.
Um, but how sometimes we see women talk about reclaiming the witch and
Hmm.
the magic and all the stuff, and just like having been burned at the stake and all the um, things that were perpetrated against women.
Hmm.
And it's possible that in some instances, magic was misused
Hmm.
by a female. Magic was abused by a female. Maybe it was you at some point, and maybe that's why. It's not. We can't just let it be convenient.
Hmm. Hmm.
We have to really look at everything for what it is. because, there's polarity to everything. There's balance to everything. Everything simply is. So it's what part of the spectrum are we accessing it, and what part of the spectrum are we then using it? Right. And again, this is continuing to get to know ourselves, but also like being okay with the hard parts.
Yeah.
Being okay with figuring out why something is what it is.
And I think this is important to coming back to the shame thing.
Yes.
Because when we know we have been a perpetrator, or we know that we have been abusive, or we've hurt someone, or whatever, if we don't talk about that, we are hiding.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't mean you have to like broadcast it on the internet.
No.
I mean, that's another thing. In this age, it's almost like people feel like they haven't talked about something if they haven't aired it out on the internet. It's like, no, it could just be your therapist. It could be close friends. It just literally needs to come out of your system. How far and wide it goes is not necessarily an indicator of your healing.
Yeah.
What else?
So many things.
I know. One of my favorite things, people listening, about Zuyapa is she's one of my favorite people to like peel back all the layers with. And you can probably also tell, you can probably feel it, like as she speaks, she thinks deeply. Like there's space between her thoughts. And I like sitting in the space between your thoughts. It reminds me to slow down because my natural pace is like 100 miles an hour. And you're like, whoa, 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 take it back.
Well, I appreciate that because some people can't stand the space. And then they want to come in and say something to try and help me along. And I'm like, mm-mm.
Yeah. I think I'm sure I was like that at first as I was getting to know you.
Maybe, probably, but it's all right. Yeah, I was kind of going to go into this whole like social media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you
space.
loved like the yes ends, that thing I posted the other day.
Yeah, I like the yes
you
and
were
stuff.
sending me messages like, can we talk about this?
Yeah. Because that stuff is big for me. It's, like on one hand, I get it. It's a way of expressing a specific point that matters for that person. And for some other people, it's going to be relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Yet also, it's also this move towards bite-sized, digestible, and it's not really digestible, but it's bite-sized, receivable.
That's a killer distinction, that it's not necessarily a soundbite. So also to give a little context for people listening, on my Instagram, I've started to take these like self-help or like spiritual memes and add context to it and like go deeper with it and explain it a little bit more. And because a lot of them are sound bites, it's quote tweetable, it's shareable, and that's the priority for people when they're sharing things like this. Not that people are being seen, met, held, nourished, fed, right? So kind of like junk food, it leaves you feeling a little empty, craving more, wanting more, sometimes a little disoriented, sometimes having an allergic reaction. So keep going.
No, yeah. I mean, yeah, I've kind of done those a couple times too. And sometimes it's like, it's really, I remember the last one I did, I was like, this is really, really pretty.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, it's like the bigger context of what's happening. It's the bigger context of how we are moving almost away from humanity and into machinery to sort of come back to a different kind of humanity that is partializing one thing. So it's like we have the Buddhists and we have the ancient spiritual teachings that talk about, this sidebar, you guys, this is probably seeming like where's she going? We're talking about media, but
We'll
I
get
don't know
there.
where I'm going, but I feel like it's going to come back around.
This is my show. They understand.
Okay, cool.
They understand
Okay, cool.
that way of being.
All right. I felt myself going in a circle. So, okay. We have the ancient teachings, right? Which are about the one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I use God, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
People can call the Almighty, whatever. I mean, you shouldn't call it whatever, but you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's about connection with that. It's about the fact that there is that God self within us, which is the goddess, which is the God, which is divinity, which is your spirit, which is all of this. That is the connection. And this is what the greater teachings are talking about, why there's meditation at the forefront, because you let go of the humanity and you discover what is more than your humanity so that you can bring it in and become more human.
Uh-huh.
Because you're human with the integration of your spirit. You're human with the integration of your divinity. And this is also why I like always lead with meditation in my stuff that I do. Because I try and empower people to stay connected when they're not with me. But where I'm going with this is, as time goes by, people splatter, continents, separate, cultures go their own ways. And now in this modern age, we're taking those concepts and we've sort of like picked them off of this shelf they were on, where they were kind of whole and in a higher place,
Mm-hmm.
because we couldn't reach them. We couldn't reach them in the world that we were standing in. So we're like taking the fruits of these trees, bringing them down to where we can hold them in our hands and where we can taste them and bring them into us in a way that is, again, relatable. But you're taking parts of a tree, right? And so as we're taking parts of the tree, we're also feeding parts of ourselves. And this is going into the social media and the media and all this stuff, because that system is at odds with the truth of spirit within humanity, because it's designed to get you to come out of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
to want to desire better skin and to desire things of the world,
Mm-hmm.
which you then have to shut off your spirit and go into machine mode to work for.
Yep.
To then, like, it becomes perpetuated. And even, like food, media, it's billions of dollars are spent on research and how to trick you, and when it's actually triggering something inside of you, making you do these things.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're becoming like, we're coming quick and projecting, which is what you were saying, when people like just like spitting stuff out on social media. We're not fully in ourselves to feel fullness and digest for ourselves. So we're digesting in real time because now everything is so fast, and we're scrolling, and your eye, like people watch someone's eyes and they're scrolling. It's crazy. So what I'm basically trying to say is, in every way, so many ways, all the greaterness of us. I mean, if we were again optimal, if we were again like really in ourselves and whatever, imagine what humans could do even better than what we're doing. Look what we've created.
Yeah.
Look what we've created at half-mast.
Totally.
Imagine.
And
does it make sense? Because I don't want to like leave that point.
it makes total sense. And as you were saying, kind of like the surviving, living, thriving thing, I wrote down integrating humanity, spiritual bypass, and dehumanizing. So I think the two ways we get pulled out of ourselves are like the bypass, and the bypass isn't always spiritual, but often it's spiritual in this context of this conversation, where we want to jump to the like,
we want to jump to the perfect. We want to jump to the outcome.
yes.
So it's even like we talked about this in both of us. We don't necessarily use music in our practices.
Yep.
Like in meditation, I don't. In your wild soul, you don't. Because for me, not necessarily using music in the beginning is teaching people how to really get to know their minds and get to know what they are inside. So that then when you really master that, you can bring in any affirmation, bring in anything you want, because you're now allowing that to support you versus relying on it to just get what you want. Because as humans, we have access. Yes, you should have riches. Yes, you should have all the things of the physical world that help you experience physicality. But not but and when we can miss something if it's not an expression of the spiritual experience. If you're just using spiritual tools and you're just using healing to go and get rich, or you're just using this because you think that there's one thing right there that you need to go and get, you'll probably be frustrated. You'll probably miss you may get it, but you're going to be frustrated. It's just going to be something else because you're missing again the totality of what that thing is that you're trying to use.
Yep. And so many of these things are pulling us out of the human experience, and the deepest, most spiritual learnings that we could have in this life come from really integrating the humanity, like you were saying, getting really cozy with being a person who has to interact with other people and does have to navigate this world instead of even like rejecting the world. It shouldn't be this way. Okay, but it is.
But it is right now. So then how do we get here and then make the change?
Yep. And then there's the dehumanizing piece of like taking away other people's humanity.
Yeah.
Not acknowledging or like othering, making them different because something makes you uncomfortable or like you have a bias or something is hard for you or there's something that you can't be with is also, and this is where I think the concept of oneness comes in, because if we're denying other people's humanity, we're denying our own.
We're denying, yeah. Yeah.
Like,
yeah, that was a big thing.
Go ahead.
I might be going, okay. That was a big thing for me with women and the, goddess movement, and even back with the elections, this is so far back with like, you love Hillary, you hate Melania, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
One woman is all women.
Mm-hmm.
And not because we act the same, not because we look the same, not because we dress the same, but because the layers of womanhood, the layers of the feminine polarity, which I've been using a lot to distinguish between, physically woman, that nuance is the feminine polarity. We're all going to experience things at different times in different ways. And we're all working through different layers of generational trauma, which you and I talked about, spiritual trauma. And if we are flowing that energy of polarity, we're flowing that energy of the goddess, she is living out in each of us in her own way.
Yeah.
And it's not really for anyone to judge or to say what that reflection is, what that layer of archetypal expression is, right? But again, we're so focused on other people and projecting and judging when there's so much to discover within our own archetypes and the ways that we're playing our roles.
Totally. And we talked about this a lot too, the cancel culture, right? Just like labeling people as cancel, just like canceling people, tossing them out, throwing them away. And it's like, yeah, sometimes we do establish that a person, like we just can't be around someone.
Yes, which is fine.
And that's a boundary that's healthy for you. But it also doesn't mean we have to be like, F this person. They shouldn't get to live. They should get to live, just not near me. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't need to interact with them. Even it's so fascinating to me. And because you also know my ex. I met you through my ex. I've talked a lot about healing from that relation on this podcast. And I'll get like odd messages from people sometimes who might think that I hate this person or these things. And I'm like, no, like, do you understand the deep love and appreciation I hold for the people who have hurt me? and for the people who have, like, I have co-created, and also it's like conveniently people miss the part where I've owned my part in everything. Because we can't, like, we just can't talk about all the wrong others have done to us without looking at how we have participated, whether it was during or after, right?
Yes.
In our own perpetuation of the trauma or whatever. And sometimes
Yes.
it's because we don't know what we didn't know. That's fine. And like you were saying earlier, everything is a friggin' process. But, you know, even with that guy last year, that dude crushed me unlike anyone ever has in my life. But I am so tender and I am so soft now because of that experience. I'm so much more receptive and available. Of the experiences I'm having with men now are like blowing my mind. And it wouldn't have been possible without that dude coming in and just blowing my world up last year.
Yep. Yeah. I say that a lot about the guy that I was engaged to. I mean, clearly it didn't happen, but that relationship opened me. That
Mm-hmm.
relationship, he was so sensitive, it showed me how to feel.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was, lots of other things with it, but like that was one thing that I really take from it. I saw what it was like to feel and really care about someone because I feel like that's the way he felt, that's the way he was with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I take that with me.
Totally.
But I do something else because this is another truth for me right now. Um, as you know, I was recently like had a male friend.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and okay, I've seen a lot of people talk about narcissism,
Mm-hmm.
and I know you have a lot too. And I have to say, I was very disconnected from that conversation
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't really get it. I um, hadn't consciously experienced it in any form. And I'm very big on, like us taking responsibility for our roles and things.
Mm-hmm.
But all I could see from social media is very sensitive, intuitive people talking about getting into relationships with narcissists and how it affected them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then maybe this was sometimes towards last year. I discovered something that was really helping me to reclaim a certain um, power within my own voice and like help me to learn how to not freeze sometimes. And I started using that. And I started to realize how many situations I was in where I was actually being manipulated,
Mm-hmm.
whether knowingly or unknowingly by either of us. But I started to notice patterns in the way people were. And then I started talking to this guy who was, lots of things. And then it came to a point where I realized everything was about him.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in certain moments okay with it because, I'm cool, I'm chill, I don't, whatever. But then towards the end, I realized actually, no. And actually, the things that you're doing are making me start to like second guess myself.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that you're saying right before you try and be nice are actually like devaluing my experience.
Yep.
And I was like, no,
Yeah.
no. And I was able to cut it off in the beginning
Mm-hmm.
for various reasons of what I've cultivated within myself. But what I have also done is really start to take a look at how did I get into those situations?
Yep.
How, at what, I mean, apparently there's something going on with me that I have allowed myself to um, be in like a passive role
Mm-hmm.
in my life and my relationships. And then I start looking at other places in my life where I've been super passive because some things we don't have control over, and I'm very sensitive to that. And sometimes these are the ways that we get into things because it's feeding us. Like basically by being passive, I was able to, I don't know, it was almost like I had something going on without having to be in control of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, that's kind of like playing the role of a child in a way. And so I'm like, oh.
Not having to claim your fullness.
Not having to claim my fullness, but still have things happen because someone else, whatever, all the stuff. But I'm like, no, I'm a woman. If this inner child part needed me to see it to come grow up with me, let's go.
Let's go. I'm going to raise myself now.
Raise myself. But like, I guess the point that I'm making is, number one, judging other people in their relationships. I wasn't doing that, but this is what people can do.
Yes.
They don't know anything about it. So they're like, oh, I can't believe you did that. I can't believe.
Or why is she still with him?
Exactly. How could you? Well, because you're not there. You don't know what that's like.
I can't tell you how many people said to me after that relationship, like, man, I was wondering when you were going to get out of there. Or like, I totally thought that person, or like, what, all these things. And I'm like, it had to run its course.
Yeah.
It had to run its course. And I sometimes hear when people are like really judging themselves, I don't know why I'm still staying. And I'm like, because it has to run its course.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
I'm
so big.
There were a couple of experiences that literally happened in like the last month of that relationship that were vital for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you had a point one. What was, I interjected there, but do you remember what else you were going to say?
Oh, that might've been it.
It's always a risk.
It's just, just about, in a way, it was kind of bringing back some other things we were saying about how we project.
Yeah.
And the potential of projection versus really looking at ourselves and using the experiences, using what we see in others as perspective without attaching or without, whatever. And also another point that I want to make about this, both of those people probably have opinions or their perspective of what happened.
Of course.
Right. And I'm like, okay with that, which is why I'm also looking at myself and not just saying I was a victim or this is what happened or whatever.
Yeah. So this is the thing I want to end with. We literally have like 4 minutes left. Something else that I've come to accept and notice is that when you are a person who is cultivating your own, all of the things that we've been talking about, which ultimately is cultivating your light.
Yes.
You will have all of it adds up, and that's pretty much essentially what it is. You will attract people like moths to a flame.
Yes.
So some of us will just be, it's not that you're broken. It's not that there's something wrong with you. You're just always going to likely attract those types of people because they are not cultivating it and they're needing to source their light elsewhere. And yours is bright as hell.
And it's literally like a zombie looking for light, looking for life. Because it's not conscious.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is, right? But sometimes people are being moved by what is not, that they don't know what's moving them.
Exactly. The guy that I was with last year was literally one of the most manipulative people I've ever met in my life. He had no idea. It was so unconscious. And I was like studying it. That's part of the reason why I was like, I know I don't deserve this treatment or whatever. But I remember having conversations with people being like, I can't exit yet. Because I know, like, I'm learning so much. Yeah. I'm like, but I was also in a place because of my previous experience I knew exactly, I saw the red flags. And it was like, my friend Eva said this on the show back in January. It was like I was taking the poison so I could figure out my own antidote. Because this isn't going to be something that goes away for me. I'm going to attract these kinds of people in my life. So how do I navigate it when they come up instead of every time being like, oh, another one? Like, it's like, okay, now I know exactly what to do. I say, like, I see it now. I feel it. I know exactly what it feels like in my body. And like, to go back to actually what we started on with your truth about like being a knower. I know. I just know. I don't need to validate it. I don't need to be able to explain it. I could just be like, not for me. That discernment. So anyway, you're on Instagram.
It's too bad. I have something good about that.
Damn, let's just go over it by like a few minutes.
Okay, a few minutes. Okay. So the inverse, right? Because I was always a knower back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I was. I would be like, I know exactly where this is going. Like, okay, I kind of know the future, you guys. I was like, I know where this is going. No need for that.
Mm-hmm.
No need for this. I missed out on so much social learning.
Mm-hmm. Social learning is what it is.
Yes, because I knew too much.
Yeah.
And so it was almost like, and this is even coming to me in this moment, it was almost like I had to forget that I knew.
Yeah.
To start to experience more.
Well, that's the friggin' whole human experience.
That's the human experience. And why it's not linear.
Yeah.
And why someone who is whatever you envision them as can go through something.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's about our own design. Yeah. And our design is going to take us through whatever we need to go through, and it does not care how you judge it.
It does not. It's going. It's like a moving train, and the brakes are broken, and it's not stopping.
Yeah. Can I have a closing thing?
Yes.
Something that's been really, really present, and I have been working through on expressing this. Pray. What I want to say to anybody who's listening to this is, number one, to pray, and also to explore how you pray. Because although I'm not saying how to do it or how not to do it, I am suggesting that you find an opening in yourself to make prayer a communion, to make your prayer a moment of grace, and to experiment, play around with, taking it out of your mind and bringing it into your heart and into your body. And in those moments where they are the scariest, the hardest, the worst, let the crack open. And then hopefully, my prayer for you is that in that crack, you remember to pray. Because that's beyond your personality. That's beyond your life. That is the depth, the truth of you. And that is where the communion can happen, because the as above is not the personality. The as above is not this drama of our social world here. The as above is the essence. The as above is the blueprint again. And, I'm making this as an offering because I have very much been contemplating my personal experiences with prayer. And I'll share about it later because I know we don't have a lot of time. But I have found that my first main, real experience when I was 13, it had to do with my period. It was like the most painful labor type thing ever. And I was just in such I can't even describe the pain I was in. And all I could think to myself was like, God, please help me. Mm. And in that minute, it went away. In that second, I stopped throwing up. I stopped, it was horrible, this pain. It went away. And then over the years, every now and then when something would really crack me and break me, and I would be on my knees, and then immediately something in my life would change. So I've learned for myself, and I'm saying this for myself, for everyone else, it is what it is for them. I've learned that communion is not in my mind. My mind can take things to fruition. Communion is the depth of the feeling, because the feeling is not whittled down into the finiteness of language. So my offering and my hope, my prayer for you all is that you find a way to, it doesn't have to be painful for you, it doesn't have to be painful, but for me, they started out as painful moments, to find ways of communing. Because I think that's also communion with yourself.
Thank you for leaving us with a sermon.
Mm.
So your website is Zuyapa.com.
And ZuyapaJackson.com.
And ZuyapaJackson.com. Your Instagram is Zuyapa Jackson. These are the places to connect with you. You have a book. We didn't even talk about the book.
Oh, yeah, we didn't talk about my book. Yeah.
Zuyapa has a book. Obviously, go get it. It's on Amazon.
Go get it. Yeah.
Well,
we kind of did talk about the book because ultimately it's about the interrelational aspects of things.
Okay, good. What is the name of the book so people can look it up?
Energy Matters.
Energy Matters. And listen, if you type Zuyapa into Amazon, there's not a lot of competition.
Yeah, exactly.
We got it. You'll find her. All right, friend. I love you so much. Thank you. This was amazing.
Thank you. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye.
I feel like I live in a life in a wonder because everything is kind of new, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm so grateful. You know, I try. It's always very easy to always be grateful because you know we get into like dark places. But I try to always shift your focus into I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful.